They should hear what I say. Okay. Good morning. My name is Tzvi Galil. I'm Dean of the College of Computing, and it's really a great honor and pleasure to introduce to you today Vivek Ranadivé, the owner of the Sacramento Kings. On Tuesday last week, we got Provost got a phone call from Gary May, a friend of mine, the former dean, the beloved Dean of Engineering here, who became the Chancellor of University of California at Davis. And he called Raphael, our provost. The provost called me to organize in a week this meeting, and several people contributed to making it happen. And we made a mistake yesterday. We announced that you can watch the talk also online. So as a result, we had about 160 RSVPs, more than the capacity of this room, but I guess some of them are RSVP'd for watching it online. So it's kind of appropriate for the College of Computing, Georgia Tech and the College of Computing to host this event for two reasons, software and innovation. So why software? College of Computing is one of only a dozen College of Computing, but it is huge. It has 11,000, 1,200 students, almost 8,000 online master students, and 3,500 students on campus, and graduates more computer scientists than any other university in the United States and possibly the world. And as you may know, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said that there are 500,000 jobs in computer science now, computing, computer science, IT, that are unfilled, there are no applicants. And this number will double by 2020, which is around the corner. So it's the hottest area, and Vivek led an unbelievable, successful software company. And you'll hear about it more in the talk. Second reason is innovation. So our online master program is the first of its kind. There are now 22 followers. And Georgia Tech was on one of only 3 universities that were on Fast Company's list of the most innovative, that's their language, most innovative companies in the world. There were only 3 universities, 2 in robotics, Stanford and MIT, so far, and 1 Georgia Tech. The innovation was OMSCS, online MS in CS. And Vivek's company was extremely innovative. You will hear about it. So please welcome Vivek Ranadivé.
I decided quite early on that I wanted to create a business of my own.
Ever bought an e-ticket on an airline, ever shipped something on FedEx, or activated that iPhone of yours, you're using TIBCO software. Ranadivé revolutionized the use of real-time data.
He is the epitome of the great entrepreneurs that have come to Silicon Valley.
He surrounded himself with some very talented people and went about building a very important information technology company.
Vivek came to us a long time ago at Sun Microsystems. The information bus was a critical component that has led us to where we are today.
I believe that the full court press is in many ways a metaphor for life. It's a metaphor for business.
How much does TIBCO CEO Vivek Ranadivé love basketball?
Who's attempting a technological revolution in Sacramento. Joining us now on SportsCenter is the new owner of the Sacramento Kings.
This guy is a cool, and I'm pretty sure when the NBA gonna start going to India, that's probably one of the biggest blast for the NBA.
This is your team, and it's here to stay.
I think Vivek is a great beacon And I think the work Vivek is doing with basketball, especially back home in India, is fantastic. You know, I hope we can collaborate more in the future to take basketball to the heights that it deserves to be in India.
Having an NBA owner who was born in Mumbai, India, in fact that Vivek traveled with the President of the United States over to India 2 weeks ago. You know, you have a country with a billion plus people, a very young population, and they're so proud that one of their own owns an NBA franchise.
We're definitely going to another level. Vivek is making sure that.
Hi, thanks. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, thank you, Dean Galil. It's a real honor to be here. And I just wanted to say, hey, I see that, yes, go Kings. He's got a Sacramento shirt on. No, but I just wanted to start by telling you that you guys are so very lucky to be here. There's no better time to be alive. There's no better time to be a student. There's no better time to be at Georgia Tech. And you have like an incredible school. You have amazing faculty, and the next 10 or 15 years are going to be incredible years. So congratulations on getting here. We actually have a yellow jacket on our team, Iman Shumpert, and I told him he was going to shoot around, and I stopped him and I said, hey, I'm going to your old digs. And he said, well, say hello to everyone. And I said, so Iman, what did you do when you were on campus? And he said, well, I had this job where I drove a golf cart around delivering packages. So what I can tell you, Dean Galil, is that Iman's done very well. He's a graduate of Georgia Tech, and he's done well for himself. So what I was going to do is I was going to start by just sharing my story, telling you about my journey. How did a boy from Bombay end up owning a basketball team? How I came, what my big idea was, how I fell in love with basketball. And then really talk a little bit about the future. Why is it that I'm so excited about the future? What are the opportunities that I see? And then answer questions. So when you get to be my age, you're able to look back at your life and reflect on it. And you say to yourself, was there a moment in your life that was your defining moment? It made you who you are. And for me, it happened when I was a little boy in Bombay. And it was the middle of the night. I had my ear plastered to a little transistor radio. And I heard these magical words, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. I was listening to the Voice of India broadcast the moon landing live all the way to Bombay. So I heard these words and I was just stunned. I said to myself, wow. Who are these people that were able to take a man, put him in a box, send him 250,000 miles away to land on a rock flawlessly, just the very first try? What vision, what brilliance, what courage, what imagination. And I said, I want to be one of these people. So I said, I'm going to find a way to get to America. I'm going to get serious about my studies. And that was my pivotal moment. So I studied hard, and they have this thing called IIT in India. For those of you who are from India, they know about it. When I was there were 5 IITs, and everybody took the same exam. And there were like 1 million people, kids taking the exam, and I think 1,500 of them were admitted. And they didn't care if you were the captain of the water polo team. They just cared about how you did in that exam. And miraculously, my name appeared on the list, and so I started at IIT. Now, IIT was very, very difficult, so I ended up transferring to an easier school. I went to MIT, did a couple of degrees there, and then that was hard, so I ended up at Harvard finally. So that was kind of my educational background. And I was working in Silicon Valley for a computer company, and that's kind of when I had my big idea. So I was a hardware engineer, and what I found is that the hardware engineers always managed to get their job done. The hardware was always on time, always on budget, and the software just never seemed to get there. And so I came up with this notion, why not do software like hardware is done? So if you look at a computer, or if you take the top of your PC, the problem to be solved is broken into pieces, and the pieces are tied together by a backplane or a bus. And so if you look at most companies, if you had like n different systems, then you would need n times n minus 1, or basically n squared back and forth interfaces to make them all work together. And companies were spending the bulk of their IT dollars on building and maintaining those interfaces. So my big idea was to create a bus, just like you have a hardware bus, and then through a single interface, an API, you could make them all connect. So all you had to do was connect into the bus, and then everything could integrate. And in keeping with my hardware background, where we had the concept of interrupts, my notion was that it should be a real-time bus. And so I coined this expression, publish and subscribe, which some of you might use in computer science now, but it was the ability to publish things on the bus and then have anyone subscribe to it. And that's how I came up with this big idea of a software bus. So armed with this idea, I started pitching it to different people. And I managed to talk my way into the office of a guy called Bob Rubin. Bob Rubin had just been made head of Goldman Sachs, and later on he would go on to become the Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton. And Bob was intrigued by my idea of a software bus. And he said, look, I've just been made CEO of Goldman, and the thing that terrifies me is the trading floor, because you have these traders who have really big egos. They have stacks of these video monitors, and we're spending a fortune on that technology, and there's got to be a better way to do it. So why don't you, I'll give you a little contract, why don't you tell me if you can apply this idea to my trading floor? And I said, great. So then he said, just one more thing, tomorrow in the morning, I want you to meet all my partners and tell them about how you're going to change trading with your idea. I said, sure. And he said, well, meet us at 7 in the morning. We'll have breakfast with you. I said, okay. Now, of course, 7, that California time, that's like 4 o'clock. And, I was not much older than you guys, and that's really early for, for a young person. So I showed up there at 7, and it was 85 Broad Street in Manhattan. And right at the top of the building, they had a room where the partners of Goldman Sachs would meet. And so I went into the room, and I sat down. And these guys were not just like running Goldman Sachs, they were running Wall Street. So there I was, just a few years older than you guys. I'm sitting there, and I'm surrounded by these legends of Wall Street. And actually, the senior most guy was a guy called Bob Mnuchin, even though Rubin was the CEO. And his son, ironically, is now the Treasury Secretary. But in those days, Bob was kind of the grizzly, experienced guy at Goldman Sachs. And so they said, tell us what you're going to do, what your idea is. So I started talking, and then as I got into my story, the door opened, and a guy walked in, and then Mnuchin waved him away, and then he said, keep going, and I kept going, and then the door opened again, and this guy walked in, and he waved him away. And then the third time it happened, he leaned over, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, son, you got to relax. So what happened is that I was so nervous that I kept doing this with my feet, like I have this nervous habit, and every time I did that, it would hit a little switch under the carpet and summon the waiter. And so that was kind of my big day, first day as an entrepreneur. But fortunately, I managed to survive that. That company went on to digitize Wall Street, and I created a whole new category of software, middleware basically, integration, and I became known as Mr. Real-Time because the publish, subscribe metaphor allowed everything to be in real time. I had a major investor in the company. They wanted to sell the company. I ended up selling it to a company called Reuters. And when I was at Reuters, the first week they had an offsite outside of London. And it was like an hour's drive outside of London. So they were very excited. They had bought this company, and I was kind of the new acquisition. And so they wanted me to talk about my technology. And so as I started talking about it, and I had been beating them in the marketplace prior to that, so they ended up just buying me. So my core technology was the information bus, TIB. So they said to me, hey, what does this TIB stand for? And I said, well, it stands for the information bus. And they said, well, that's not what they told us at Reuters. And I said, well, what did they tell you? And they said, well, they told us it stood for that Indian bastard. So I was like, okay, well, that's fine. Well, the bastard won, you know. So, but anyways, so I ran this company as a part of Reuters for a couple of years, and my notion had always been that that this bus should be not just the bus for trading floors, but for all industry, and that the trading floor of the 80s was really a microcosm of how every business and how the world would look like in the future. So Reuters agreed to let me license back the underlying technology, and I created a company called TIBCO. And the notion was that if you get the right information to the right place at the right time, and you put it in the right context, then you can make the world better. And that company became one of the fastest growing enterprise software companies. It basically digitized and made real-time just about every industry, from retail to manufacturing to finance to transportation and logistics and government. So that was kind of the story of TIBCO. It was worth billions of dollars. It grew rapidly. And then somewhere along the way, I fell in love with basketball. And the way it happened is my daughter's now 25, but she was a 12-year-old. I was a single dad, and I was trying to find ways to spend more time with my little girl. Now, she had two brothers, and I had coached them in soccer, but she wanted to play basketball. So I foolishly volunteered to coach her basketball team. Now, understand that I grew up in Bombay playing cricket, and I'd never actually touched a basketball in my life. But there was a guy called John Pay who had played football. He'd also played basketball, and he ran this program in Redwood City. It was like a club basketball program. And he said, okay, you know, I get it. You want to spend time with your daughter, so I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to let you coach her team. And I said, great. So then, you know, we had a day set when the practice would start. I showed up, and there was this huge room in Redwood City, huge gym with multiple courts. And there were three things that immediately struck me. Number one, that they had this thing called a draft, which I didn't know about. And so they had given me the girls that nobody else wanted. So some of them had never even touched a basketball. Number two, I looked around the room on the other courts, and the other guys were like 7 feet tall, and they were from places like Duke and Stanford. They were ex-Division I basketball players, and then there was me. And then number three, I was like terrified, because I thought this was a way to bond with my little girl, and instead of that, you know, I was going to make a fool of myself. So I'm standing there, I'm looking around, seeing the other dads. I got like this motley crew of girls in front of me. One of them showed up in soccer clothes, and I'm holding this basketball. And I'm thinking, okay, this is going to really end badly, because I thought that this was a way to bond with Anjali, and now, you know, it's going to be like a disaster. But I didn't want to show that, so I pretended like I was really confident. So I looked at them and said with great confidence, I said, girls, today we're going to run. And I made them just run up and down the court for an hour, just nonstop, just run, run, run. But by the way, if you watch how our basketball team plays now, it's doing the same thing. So that was like the first practice. Then I said, you know, I can't just keep making them run. At some point, I got to learn what this game is. So I went and I studied the game. And like many of you in the room, I'm kind of a math nerd. And I came up with a math equation for the game. And in the next practice, I taught them the math equation. And surprisingly, they embraced it and they bought into it. And we ended up winning every single game and taking the team to the national championship. So, of course, I fell in love with the game. Now, there were some interesting games. There would be games, and basically, for those of you who know basketball, I wanted to win the turnover battle, and I did a full court press the whole game long. And there were games when, you know, we'd be up 25-0, and they would tell us that we couldn't do the press anymore. And there were games that we were playing against teams where the girls had been playing since they were little. And in one case, there was this coach who was like this big guy, and he got very, very upset that we beat them, and he asked me to meet him in the parking lot. And so I said, okay. And when you saw the film, one of my closest friends was shown in the film. He's a famous running back, Roger Craig. So like, I might not be the smartest guy, but I'm not the stupidest guy. So when I went to the parking lot, I took Roger Craig with me. And then it was a very cordial meeting after that. But I fell in love with the game. It's just an amazing game. And a few years later, and by the way, for those of you who read Malcolm Gladwell's books, his latest book, the last book he wrote, David and Goliath, is the first chapter is about that story. And he based the book on that. But he's a great writer, so I would encourage you to read the book. So my friend and neighbor, Joe Lacob, called me up, and he was bidding on the Warriors, and he was bidding against a guy called Larry Ellison, who started Oracle, and he asked me to join him in the process. And so we ended up paying $450 million, the highest price at the time, and buying the team. Then we got booed, and the team was terrible. And just as the team got better, I got a call from David Stern of the NBA, and he said, look, you're the vice chairman, and you guys, you should just buy your own team. And Steve Ballmer from Microsoft was going to buy the Sacramento Kings and move them to Seattle. And he said, look, you got to save the team. And my initial reaction was that I live in Silicon Valley, and finally the team is winning, and this could be a decent team. I haven't even really been to Sacramento. But then I saw the passion, and the folks wearing Sacramento shirts will know what I'm talking about. The Kings fans are just unbelievable. They're like the best fans in the world. And they launched a whole movement on social media. And I just fell in love with the fans, and I fell in love with the city, and so I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I came to the US with like $50 in my pocket. By the time I arrived in California, I was in debt to MIT and Harvard. And so everything I had, I owed to the state of California. And I just felt as an immigrant that this was something maybe I was supposed to do. California is now the 5th largest economy in the world. Sacramento is the capital. So I ended up jumping in, and we paid $540 million for the team, won the bid. And part of what I had to do when I bought the team was I had to give a personal guarantee to the NBA that I would have an arena built by 2017. Now, again, there's kind of a recurring theme here that I'm always signing up to do things that I've never done before. So, like, I built a house, but it took me like 5 years to build a house. So I had no idea how I would build an arena in 3 years. But we ended up, the state ended up helping us. They passed a law, SB 743, Senate Bill 743, that allowed us to fast track the development. And we actually finished it a year ahead of that deadline in 2016. And I'd love for all of you to come see it sometime. It's been rated the world's best arena. It's a high-tech marvel, and it's really a feat of engineering ingenuity. And it also meets high social standards. It's the only arena that has a LEED Platinum rating. It's completely run by solar energy. The food is all local. And so it's an example of what one can do where business interests are aligned with what's good for the environment and good for the community. Well, anyway, I'll kind of switch gears now and talk a little bit about why I started this conversation by saying that this is a really exciting time to be you. And you guys are really the first digital natives on the planet. You guys, your whole lives, you've lived digital lives, and you're natives of the digital world. And the way I see it is we're entering a new era right now. I call it civilization 3.0. Civilization 1.0 was the start of modern civilization. It was driven by the agrarian revolution. And people were farmers, shopkeepers, carpenters. It was the age of the artisan. Land was the raw material. Now, with the Industrial Revolution, we entered Civilization 2.0, and it was really the age of the corporation. So it went from the age of the artisan to the age of the corporation. And the raw materials were energy and steel, and it was all about corporate efficiency. We're now living in a time where the world's largest bookseller has no bookstores, the world's largest taxi company has no cars, the world's largest hotel, Airbnb, owns no real estate. So it's really the age of information and data and service, and the raw materials are data and imagination. So this is really your time. And when the world went from 1.0 to 2.0, there was a massive disruption that we saw. And only a small percentage of the 1.0 jobs were still there in 2.0. During 1.0, most people worked on farms, and of course now very few people work on farms. So now as the world shifts from Civilization 2.0 to Civilization 3.0, you're going to see the same phenomenon. And it's going to cause dislocation, it's going to cause income inequality in the short term, and that's why we're seeing some of the political movements that are driven really by this disruption. But the future is very exciting and it's very bright. And I believe there's 5 forces that are shaping this future, and it's important to kind of understand what those are, and so you can harness them and move ahead. One is just the explosion of data, and you guys know this well. If you look at how much data mankind has created throughout history, and you call it X, and then you look at how much data has been created in the last year or so, it's like 10X that. You know, today there'll be more data, more videos put up on YouTube than all of Hollywood and all the movie industries have created in history. So just the amount of data just keeps going up exponentially. The second is the rise of mobility. When the phone first came out, it took 100 years for there to be 1 billion landlines. It took 10 years for there to be 1 billion mobile phones. And it took just 1 year for there to be 1 billion smart phones, cell phones. And each of these phones that we now carry has more computing capacity than all of NASA had when I heard the moon landing. So think about that. There's billions of people walking around the planet with more computing capacity in their pocket than all of NASA had to put a man on the moon. So there's the explosion of data, there's the rise of mobility. The third force is just the emergence of social networks. It used to be that you had to be a large corporation to reach large audiences. And now that playing field has been leveled so that anybody can leverage social networks to reach massive audiences. And it still blows me away that a friend of mine, Mark Benioff, recently bought Time magazine for $190 million. And one of the Kardashians created a company less than 2 years ago, and that company is worth $1 billion. And so it's like 5x what an iconic, legendary brand like Time was worth. So again, it's these social platforms allow you to reach very large audiences at a very low cost. The fourth force is the rise of the Asian economies. A few hundred years ago, China and India were 2/3 of the world economy, and most people predict that at some point in this century, we'll revert to that kind of a situation, and certainly in your lifetime. And the fifth factor is my favorite, and I call it math trumping science. And what I mean by this is that everything ends up being a pattern recognition problem. It ends up really being a math problem. So you don't really have to always figure out the why, you just have to find the pattern. So when scientists were trying to figure out how the AIDS virus mutated, they tried for years and they couldn't figure it out. They then converted it into a math problem, put it into a game called Fold It, and within a week, gamers had found the answer. And so really, it's about finding the pattern, and you can then explain the why. And we had a customer in Europe and they had a major problem with credit card fraud. They were constantly trying to figure out how to solve it with data mining and other techniques, and they just never got there because you could be very strict, but then you would turn away a lot of good customers. So we kind of converted it into a pattern recognition issue, and what we found is very interesting that if you bought champagne, razor blades, and diapers, it was probably a stolen credit card. So now you can say, okay, now let me explain the why. Why would that be? You say, okay, well, champagne, it's a big ticket item, easy to pawn off, makes sense. Same with razor blades. Well, then why diapers? And you say, oh, okay, the guy's trying to look like he's a dad and he needs to get home in a hurry, he's taking diapers, and he's a good guy, and who's going to stop a guy buying diapers? And of course, you can pawn them off too. So most problems end up being pattern recognition, problems, and the advances that we've seen with machine learning are truly mind-blowing. And I don't think there's a serious computer scientist on the planet who could have predicted 15 or 20 years ago that you could have a self-driving car. Just that would have seemed like such an impossible problem to solve. And it's funny because when cars first came out, we would call them horseless carriages, and now we're calling autonomous vehicles driverless cars. And your kids will probably never get a driver's license, and you go to a stable to ride horses, and they'll be going to a racetrack to drive cars. But when you think about the possibilities of machine learning, it's truly mind-blowing. And like nobody could have predicted that a computer program could beat the world champion and all the champions at Go. And again, you guys, as some of you are computer science students, and you understand just the magnitude of that problem. And if you just tried a brute force solution, and you think of what's the largest number you can think of, and it's not grains of sand, it's not stars, it's atoms in the universe, and there's 10 raised to 70 atoms in the universe, but there's 10 raised to 170 combinations in the game of Go. And yet, now a computer program in a few months was doing what had taken a game that had been played by humans for thousands of years. So the kind of the changes around that and the opportunities to enhance lives are going to be amazing. One of the things that I'm now involved with is I've launched a venture firm. I've been historically lucky. One of the first investments into Google was done at my annual holiday party. And I was a lucky investor in some other companies. And so the University of California had approached me about creating a fund jointly with them. And so I launched a fund called BOW Capital, B-O-W. It stands for Better Our World. And we're kind of the bow, the entrepreneurs, the arrow. And what we want to do is help entrepreneurs reach escape velocity. So you start a company, you get some traction, but then how do you actually escape Earth's orbit and reach for the stars? And it's with money, it's with mentorship, it's with connections, and so we have a whole playbook for how do you get there. And so I believe that every year there'll be 5 to 10 companies that have the potential to be S&P 500 companies. And I believe that we're going to see trillions of dollars of new opportunities. I'm seeing trillion-dollar industries emerging every day. And obviously just applying machine learning and computing, creates all kinds of disruptions, but there's others as well. So I'm very excited about investing in gene editing. There's a technology called CRISPR-Cas9 that allows you to edit genes, and literally you'll be able to eliminate genetic disorders like muscular dystrophy, or you'll be able to create new materials. Like you'll say, I want to create a peanut that doesn't cause allergies, and you'll be able to create that. That's going to be a massive industry. The second is like the whole microbiome. The universe is over 14 billion years old. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and 500 million years after the Earth came, there was bacteria, and it turns out that bacteria controlled humans, and gut bacteria are now thought to be really, they impact our health, and they could be the cause of disease. And so the microbiome in that area is going to be a huge $1 trillion sector. New materials, they're going to be a $1 trillion sector. And so, you have materials like graphene that, are truly mind-blowing. They're atom thick, and, they're extremely conductive, and they'll be on screens, and there'll be airplanes made out of it. But you could also pour like salt water and get sweet water by using a surface of graphene, and somebody's going to crack the code on how to make it. I think shipping and logistics, as the world gets Amazon and we shift from stores to everything going to Amazon, we don't have the roads right now and the warehouses to support the Amazoning of the world. And so shipping and logistics and warehousing, that's going to be a huge sector. So there's all these huge sectors emerging. And for those of us who've been around longer, if you just think of the way that our lives have changed in the last 15 years, and then you try to project that out 15 years, it's truly mind-blowing. And so, you don't stop at the gas station to pick up a map anymore. You don't go to a phone booth and fumble for quarters to make a phone call. You don't wait in line on a Friday evening at a Blockbuster. You don't come to Atlanta and say, hey, I have to remember to get my camera. And so there's all these things that have changed our lives. And now, 15 years out, I think most medical diagnostics will be by a computer program. Already we're seeing that machine learning algorithms are better at reading MRIs and imaging information. They're better, faster, cheaper at doing that. Autonomous vehicles will be a reality, 15, 20 years out. We'll have factories will be highly automated. So, we'll use a lot less energy and we'll have less waste. So I believe the world is going to be a lot better, and there'll be new industries that emerge. So anyways, I can go on talking because I'm so excited about the future, but I'll stop, Dean, and I'll take questions. Yeah, so I'll repeat the question. So his question was that I've gone from being a tech guy to being a team owner, and how is that different, and how has that impacted my lifestyle? And yeah, it is a huge change, and I like to joke that before I bought the Kings, I was still like an okay guy. I had written 3 New York Times bestsellers. I'd built a multi-billion-dollar company. I'd helped companies, but now all of a sudden, you're in a whole different. You go from being on CNBC to, to being on ESPN and even on social channels, and so it's for about a week. The first week is kind of cool. You walk in and you get a table at a restaurant, but then after the first week, for the rest of your life, it's less cool because you have to you're being watched, and so. But it is a huge privilege, and it's a huge honor. There's only 30 teams. And at the Kings, we take that with great pride. And the first thing you learn when you buy a team is that you don't actually own the team, you just write the checks. And so the team is owned by the guys wearing the Sacramento jerseys. And it's owned by them, it's owned by the city, it's owned by the fans. And you're just a steward, and hopefully you can be a good steward. So we have really, my mission statement at the Kings is to build a winning franchise that enhances the lives of those it touches and makes the world a better place. And we've really taken that to heart. Our $1 billion investment in the city has completely revitalized the city. It's transformed the city. When I got there, the city was on the decline. It's now become the fastest growing city in the state. It's become one of the top 3 destinations for millennials. We've created thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in economic activity. But we've also stepped beyond that. We're going to really, I've been very involved in evangelizing and taking the game internationally to other countries, China, India, and so on. And we've also taken our social responsibility very seriously. And so when I first bought the Kings, we had this issue with the Clippers owner, and I became the first owner to publicly speak out and go on Good Morning America and other shows and say that, we have to have zero tolerance for that kind of behavior. More recently, we had these demonstrations where and actually we were playing the Atlanta team, and the owner and I were having dinner along with Chancellor May in my private room when I was summoned by my Martina over there, who runs our business. And, we had demonstrators, and, the way that we handled it, we formed a partnership. We became the first business in the country to form a partnership with Black Lives Matter and with Bill Black. And, really I'm trying to make it possible for every kid in the city to have access to the digital future. And so we view it as it's a privilege and it's an honor, but it's also a responsibility.
One more question.
We also have a couple online questions.
No, we have no time. We have to be out by 11:50. There's a class.
How do you feel that your engineering background has helped you out throughout your entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, so it's been terrific because, we as engineers, you look at everything and you kind of trying to frame it in an engineering construct. And I think it's a fabulous background to have because really at the end of the day as an engineer, you're a problem solver, and it almost doesn't matter what the problem is. You kind of approach it, the way you think and the way you approach it is highly structured, and I think that's great. But I do want to say one thing, that I'm also a big fan of a liberal arts education. Even though I have a left brain education, I think the right brain is important as well.
So give a round of applause to our wonderful and inspiring speaker. I have a small gift to give to you.
Oh, thank you.
This is a T-shirt of our online master program that will be 5 years old in January. Then you'll get the 5-year anniversary T-shirt.
That's awesome. Thank you.
This program graduates this year over 1,000 graduates in Master in Computer Science, more than the total of the Ivy League, Stanford, and MIT combined.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So
can I just mention something? So if you guys are game, what I'd love to do is I'd love to sponsor like a hackathon and a startup contest.
Great.
And I'll give obviously good rewards to the winners.
Okay.
But I'd love to have a startup contest on your campus and maybe a hackathon.
That will be wonderful.
And maybe you can be one of the judges, Dean.
I'm game.
Okay, deal.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Dean, get in here.
We have to.